If you're coming into this video not having watched Something Is Not Right Part 5, I encourage you to watch that first. That talked about Real ID and what's attached to it and how evil it truly is. Just to recap, a really important point from that last video, everything can be found at www.refuserealid.org. Please go to that website, click at the top, take action to help stop the Real ID by contacting your local representatives. Very easy to do. Scroll down, read these 6 points. The Real ID is a federal ID masquerading as a state driver's license. It will become digitized and enable biometric-based surveillance. It will be a surveillance and control system. If you have the Real ID already, you can make the switch. Click in the middle here. There are only 5 states right now that will no longer allow you to have a state standard ID. If you're in any of the other 45 states, here's how you make the switch. I went to the DMV personally and returned my Real ID with the star on it and got my state ID, my state driver's license. It was very easy. This goes deeper into that evil. Real ID is going to be connected to CBDCs, central bank digital currency. And ultimately, all of this is going to form a digital identity takeover that basically enslaves the entire world.
They're literally marketing this to Americans now on NBC fake news. You're going to have your chip under your skin, and it's going to be your digital ID and your digital wallet. I mean, the EU is rolling out right now your digital wallet with your digital ID, your digital currency. It's happening as we speak. It's not a hypothetical future threat. There are thousands of lemmings in human bodies walking around Sweden right now who have their microchip with their COVID vaccine passports. Once they take that last critical step, which is the digital ID, that'll be your access for being able to work, being able to access healthcare, being able to go shopping, being able to get your children enrolled in any kind of school or program, there will be no turning back. If you say no to any of the future things, you'll just be locked out of everything.
When you say, I can't remember how you said it, but you said it sounded like you were saying the stage is kind of set. Yeah. Almost everything that's happened needs to happen. What has happened that needed to happen, and what still needs to happen?
Well, before the Antichrist comes, one of the things that we know from the fathers of the church is that there will be a worldwide implosion of people's morality. So, which we've seen, right? So that's happened since the 1950s. There's been an implosion where people just aren't following the laws of God or the natural law in any sense of the term. So we have that. The other part of it is, again, is the unification of the worldwide economies, because he has to be able to basically control people en masse. The other thing is it has to be something that the people that are alive, that in order to survive, you have to be able to plug into that economy in some fashion. That's why they talk about the mark of the beast. Well, we're almost there, where they could literally just decide, look, unless you're going to sign off on certain things, you're not going to have access to the digital currency that we're going to enact worldwide, and therefore, because that's how he could rule it. At least that's my opinion. I think that's one of the ways how he's going to control people is through digital currencies, and he's going to just shut people off, and that's how they'll be able to basically starve people out if they're unwilling to sign off on the Antichrist's rules.
Basically, what you have in your digital wallet does not function like real money. The government gives you, let's say the government gives you a tax refund, a child tax credit, $2,000 in your account because you have kids. Great, that sounds awesome. You have a digital dollar in your digital wallet. That can be programmed in particular ways to nudge and control your financial behavior. So there could be provisions saying you have to spend this in the next 9 months. You can't give it to your kids. You can't donate it to THINQ or, churches that are bigoted. You can't save it and put it into retirement. We want to stimulate the economy with this, so you got to spend it. Oh, and by the way, you have to spend it on green energy related products or corporate approved products that have good ESG scores or, vendors that have the right kind of social credit score, right? So you already see the nudges. Furthermore, we can program this digital dollar, if you don't spend it in 9 months, to decrease in value by 10% every month that you don't spend it until, 20 months later, it disappears. So what you realize is this is not actually money. This is not the same as $2,000 cash.
The central banks are intending to create a digital currency that will use blockchain to collect with all of the pieces of information in it, but it will be flashed back to a central computer at the central bank, and it will be stored under your digital identity. That will be able to be analyzed using artificial intelligence software wherever you might go, wherever you might show up, whatever you did on social media, tags where you are or who you're with or whatever. All of that information can be transmitted back to be attached to, in blockchain form, attached to your digital identity. And they're intending to do this to the whole planet. The whole planet. It's inconceivable that it's this big.
The important thing to understand about central bank digital currency in an all digital financial system is it's not a currency. It's a control grid. Now, the process to implement central bank digital currency around the world is being overseen by the Bank of International Settlements in Basel, Switzerland. It's owned by its members. The New York Fed and the Fed are both, the Board of Governors are both shareholders in the BIS. 63 of the top central banks are in the BIS, and they are running a process with a major partnership with the Federal Reserve to implement CBDCs, and they're prototyping around the world. In 2020, October 2020, there was a panel at the IMF on cross-border payments. Jay Powell, chairman of the Federal Reserve, was there. Augustine Carstens was there. And Augustine Carstens said the following, and I'm going to play this for you in a second, but I want you to know I was basically raised and trained to be a central banker. I was asked to be a governor of the Federal Reserve and declined. But I was raised that way. And one of the things you're raised to understand is you never, ever, you use pretzel talk. You never explain what you're going to do. You talk in circles. And this was the first time I had ever seen a central banker in English explain exactly what they were planning on doing and why. And I almost fell off my chair. And if you think I almost fell off my chair, you should have seen Jay Powell's face. Okay, so here's Augustine Carstens, 57 seconds, explaining CBDCs.
Our analysis on CBDC, in particular for the use of general use, we tend to establish the equivalence with cash. And there is a huge difference there. For example, in cash, we don't know, for example, who's using a $100 bill today. We don't know who is using a 1,000 peso bill today. A key difference with the CBDC is that central bank will have absolute control on the rules and regulations that will determine the use of that expression of central bank liability. And also, we will have the technology to enforce that. Those two issues are extremely important, and that makes a huge difference with respect to what cash is.
Here's what he told you. He told you the money that you have is not your money, it's their money. So he said it's an expression of central bank liability. And what he said, and of course this is the beauty of AI and software and telecommunications and the different systems we're putting into place, what he said is, we can make the rules centrally. The central bankers can make the rules, and we can enforce them using the technology. Now, what that means is we've all lived in a world where the bankers ran monetary policy, but our legislative representatives and our executive branch ran fiscal policy. What he's saying is we can now run fiscal policy through your money, and that means we can do taxation without representation. So that's the message. We intend to have total central control.
The idea is to also have, carbon emissions, carbon taxes, intimately interfaced with this coming digital ID, digital wallet paradigm. And there's a lot of different efforts to create those systems, but it's not just going to be one system. It's going to be a mosaic of interoperable systems. ID 2020, for example, a big force behind the vaccine passport push. That's the Rockefellers and Gates. The CBDC discussion is about keeping attention on a very narrow band of what they're doing, but it's much broader than that. So what we really need to do to defeat things like this is to not engage and become part of that system, because we risk entering into this type dictatorship that's very totalitarian and authoritarian and violent. And you don't want to brush up against that.
The UN has lots of agendas, you could say. What is Agenda 2030? Explain it to us.
So very much like the central planners of the last century, the UN likes to do things in bite-sized chunks. The communists and the Soviet Union used to have 5-year plans. Well, the UN's got 15-year plans. So prior to the Agenda 2030 UN Sustainable Development Goals, they had the Millennium Development Goals. Those covered from 2000 up to 2015. Agenda 2030 covers from 2015 to 2030. Again, it's a comprehensive plan over every area of our lives. It's kind of a subset of Agenda 21. And as the leaders of the United Nations made clear while this was being debated and adopted, they intend to leave no one behind. Actually, the head of the General Assembly, when this was being negotiated, Peter Thompson, called this the Master Plan for Humanity. The Secretary General at the time, Ban Ki-moon, called it the Global Declaration of Interdependence, which I believe was a direct attack on our National Declaration of Independence here in this country. So very, very significant. Again, it deals with every area. It deals with your health. It deals with the environment. It deals with our food systems. It deals with education. It deals with every possible area of life, very much like the Great Reset that the World Economic Forum would later propose. And so all of these actually work together. That's what people need to understand. None of these are independent. They're all working together, ultimately for the same objective, which we described earlier in the program, a one world system where the sovereignty of nation states would be gone, individual liberty, especially as recognized in our country as coming from our creator, would be abolished. And people need to be paying attention to this. We need to be having a national discussion about it, and yet there are very few places where you'll hear anything about this when it comes to newspapers and television.
There's a worldwide movement to control you, believe it or not, by seizing your private property and resources. This sounds like something from a movie that is absolutely unbelievable, but it's true. Rosa, tell people exactly where they can find this information as you lay out what Agenda 21 is.
Well, we are breaking the right-left paradigm on this issue because freedom is nonpartisan. And Agenda 21 Sustainable Development is the action plan to inventory and control all resources, all means of production, all energy, all information, all human beings in the world. It's a totally comprehensive plan. You will find it everywhere. It's in the educational system. When you start to understand what you're looking at, you will see it in smart meters, you'll see it in outcome-based education, in the curriculum that your children are studying. You will see it in smart growth. You'll see it in the Wildlands Project and in regional boards. This is unelected boards and commissions that you have absolutely no control over. I call it the biggest public relations scam in the history of the world because they've got all the jargon terms. Who doesn't want to be vibrant, walkable, bikeable? You'll see it as Vision 2020, Your Town 2035. All of these plans are the same across the United States. They just have different names.
It really is about taking private property, about seizing and stopping all private property. If I can, just let me read a little bit. Land cannot be treated as an ordinary asset. controlled by individuals and subject to the pressures and inefficiencies of the market. Private land ownership is also a principal instrument of accumulation and concentration of wealth, and therefore contributes to social injustice. If unchecked, it may be a major obstacle in the planning and implementation of development schemes. The provision of decent dwellings and healthy conditions for the people can only be achieved if land is used in the interest of society as a whole. So,
yeah, and what's that from? The United Nations Habitat 1 in 1976. That is the United Nations plan for property, private property. And I want to remind people that we are our most important private property. You know, this is a surveillance program. Those drones, all of that National Defense Authorization Act, that is part of United Nations Agenda 21 Sustainable Development.
the drones are?
Yes, that's right.
How?
Because if this is an inventory and control plan, and you are being inventoried and controlled. This is part of the plan. This is a totalitarian plan, and it is in effect right now. The plan to move you out of the rural and suburban areas into the city centers, into smart growth, is so that you can be more easily managed and surveilled.
I hate these shows.
In a very quick nutshell, the proposal out of Davos is essentially this: a group of exceptionally powerful individuals, predominantly in the banking, finance, and business sector, in alliance with government leadership, are proposing that as a result of these COVID lockdowns that have done a great deal of damage to economies globally, they perceive that they now have an opportunity to rebuild economies, but to do so in what they believe is a more enlightened fashion. And that impulse to take away private property ownership and to concentrate it into the hands of a representative government is purely Marxist. I mean, it is the heart and soul of the Marxist idea, which stripped down to its basics is nobody owns property, it is collectively owned. And as I say, of course, the fallacy there is that it is not actually collectively owned, it is owned by those in power. Now, what can go wrong with that? Well, if we look at modern-day China, we get a very good example of this one. Modern-day China, of course, a bit of a mixed economy. They have prospered to the degree that they've started permitting free trade. However, they are still very much a Marxist society. And they work according to social credit scores. And social credit scores imposed by law represent a very chilling idea. Now imagine this, for example. You as a family do not own your home. You do not own what is around you. You do not own your business. The government has absolute control. Now imagine a scenario in which you do something that the government does not approve of. You read a book that it doesn't want you to read. You write an essay or an article that it doesn't like. You create a YouTube video commenting on something in a negative way. Now, those are all things that productive human beings do to critique and build and grow their society. But you can't do it there. And if you do something that the government disapproves of, using these social credit scores, they can ghost you. They can effectively lock you out of your world. And it works because you don't own anything. It is that ownership, that broad-based private ownership, that keeps people free from government tyranny. Maggie Thatcher from the UK very famously embarked on a project to expand human liberty in her nation by trying to ensure as much broad-based private and individual ownership of property as possible. In that, she was in agreement with George Washington, who said that it is property rights that prop up human freedom. You can go into great depth and philosophy on this one. You can even take property rights down to the level of your thoughts. Are you free to own them? Are you free to express them? Or is the realm of thinking controlled by a collective? Now, of course, all that sounds, it sounds like terrible fear-mongering. But of course, the question for anyone who looks back over history is to ask, could it happen here? Could it happen again? And I think if you do know your history, the answer is it happens surprisingly easily and it happens surprisingly often. When communities play with this idea of collectivist ownership, I would argue that it happens 100% of the time, and that when we're talking about collective ownership and the elevating of the group over the sanctity of the individual, we are dealing with a formula that has been deeply damaging to the human species. We have to help the poor and the struggling among us. That is a Christian, a Judeo-Christian principle. It has been built into Western classical thinking for a very long time. But a welfare state in which you don't do anything, but you live dependent on the government, seems to cause human beings to rot. I don't think it's a healthy scenario. We're proposing it on a global scale.
There's 7.5 billion people on the planet, and they want everybody into the system. And you'll see the language, for instance, at the United Nations over and over, no person left behind.
I've spent a lot of time in my life with the central bankers and the people doing this, and I have to tell you, I'd rather die in the barricades than go into the system. I will not live in the system they're planning for us. It's not worth living. And so you have nothing to lose by using cash and doing everything you can to refuse to comply now, because whatever the inconvenience, it's far better than what they're proposing. It's not a world you want to live in.
This is not science fiction. The debanking, the government mandated under the Emergencies Act in Canada, which had never been invoked before, and the Supreme Court of Canada now says it should not have been invoked under those circumstances, didn't meet the legal criteria, but never mind, they did it anyway. Yet not only forcibly removed with a militarized police force the truckers from Ottawa, but shut down not only their bank accounts, but the bank accounts of people who donated money to support them. Right. So imagine giving $50 to the truckers and then going to the ATM the next day and you can't get into your checking account.
Programming digital currencies to control where you can spend. Now, I know all the crypto bros are thinking that their whole technology and cryptocurrency is a stream to a freer world. I think it's quite the opposite. I had a viewer even sent me a photo where they tried to access the ATM. And it was blocked because they'd made a donation to a protest. Let's jump over and have a look at that. So here it is. Your financial institution has not allowed access to this card or account. That's how it can happen. Brianne is a single mother from Chilliwack working at a minimum wage job. She gave $50 to the convoy when it was 100% legal.
I've been warning about this for at least 15 years. I mean, when they came out with ID 2020, it was already obvious to me then. It was Bill Gates, it was Microsoft and Gavi, it was the Rockefeller Foundation. Why were Bill Gates and the Rockefellers plotting to give us digital IDs at the international level 15 years ago? Was it because of COVID? No, it's because they understood it. And at the same time, by the way, they launched the Better Than Cash Alliance. This was 2012. Again, I covered this in TNA. Ford Foundation, United Nations, Bill Gates, Visa, MasterCard. They've been planning this for so many years, so we don't have to speculate. We know exactly what they want to do with this.
The digital identity system is extremely valuable, not just for financial activities, but for health and voting and education, and that's called MOSIP. Once you have the digital money system, then there's all sorts of services and applications that can be built on top of that, whether it's helping with health or education or agriculture, giving people visibility into their financial status, giving them advice, should they take a loan, should they buy insurance, what makes sense. The phone becomes a connection for low cost interaction with those customers that doesn't require human activity. Here we're trying to make sure that the developing countries have the benefit of the digital revolution, in some cases before it gets to even some of the rich countries who have legacy systems that people are so used to that the speed that they'll transition out of them won't be as fast as, say, China or India that didn't have that history. And so it's really learning what worked in China and India, and now making it easy for even smaller countries to do this.
My country was the first where they made cash illegal. 2016, digitalization was forced on the country. 8 o'clock in the evening announced midnight, cash was illegal, the big notes. And 70% of the economy crashed. This digitalization is now going all over the world, and there's a war on cash. They call it war on cash, because cash is merely a medium of exchange. It has no value in itself. It's just a promise. You read the dollar note, it says, I promise to pay the bearer. When it's digital, even a credit card, you're giving rents to the global financial system. But when it's cryptocurrency in the hands of algorithms, in the hands of big tech, they will do what is happening in China. Create social credit system to decide a new caste system. And you might have also followed that while all this has been happening, the founder of the World Economic Forum did a book called The Great Reset on how to deal with the COVID crisis. And everything we're seeing unfold is part of that Great Reset. But an element of that Great Reset is you will own nothing. If ever there was a time for humanity to wake up, now is the time.
There's almost no example of getting something that can be used to control people and having those who are nefarious on either side not use those things. Eventually, they will find a way to use those things. Look at the Patriot Act. We all were. You know what? We're all patriots. We're all patriots. We all believe in the same thing.
Maybe a slight simplification of that conversation, but I know what you're saying.
But generally speaking, we all just kind of went along with it. And look how out of control it is now. Look how out of control our country is on spying on our own citizens. Something 20 years ago we would have marched up to Washington to make sure all of those people were standing in front of a judge and going to jail that week. We don't even recognize it anymore. You don't want these tools given.
Write this book. What's the premise of us understanding what is even a biomedical security state?
So a biomedical security state is the melding together of three things. The first is digital technologies of surveillance and control combined with information about you that is basically rooted in your biology. And then having those systems of surveillance and control being backed up by the police powers of this state. So just to flesh this out, I'll give you an example. During COVID, the CDC bought from a very shady broker cell phone data to track the movements and interactions of persons to see if during government-ordered lockdowns, people were gathering at churches and at schools and at other public spaces. And even though this data was supposed to be de-identified, some researchers at Princeton showed that with only 4 data points, you could easily, know that, okay, this number over here, that's Gabe, and this guy over here, that's Aaron, and we know that they're having this conversation now in the church parking lot, right? So people never consented to that. People weren't even aware or notified that the government was using their cell phone data in that way. And that is a very crude level of digital surveillance that was deployed during COVID. without people's knowledge or consent, that is just sort of the tip of the iceberg in terms of where this technology can go.
The difference here, digital ID is the first step to an authoritarian state where they have all control. Doesn't mean you end there. It just means you've given people that power. You don't ever want to give people that power.
So if they tell you they won't pay your benefits if you don't sign up for digital ID, I'm going to ask you to swallow hard and not sign up. Don't sign up. The more people who don't sign up, the more likely we are to be able to defeat this, because other people will be taking their lead from you. So if you've got children, I think you should be willing to go hungry for a bit. If I have to, I will, in order to stop this happening. So I made the bold statement, I'm not going to take on a digital ID. And some people have said, you will lose access to your money in your bank accounts. Do you know what? So be it. If I sign up for it, what's going to happen is what I've outlined to you. Money's not going to matter. One, they'll steal it. And secondly, I don't want to survive in a world in which I'm beeping my way into and out of shops and beeping my way to buy some moldy bread with insect flour, right? I'm not going to live in that world. So I'm just going to stop. And the worse the punishment threatened brought upon me, the worse the retribution, the more sure you should be that this is a bad thing. So even if they say we're going to fire you, say respectfully, I don't trust this system. I'm going to defer my decision. I'm not going to sign up this month. Let them fire you. I think they'll have to give up. Remember NHS 100K when they said, we're going to jab you all or you'll lose your job. And 100,000 of them campaigned on the street and the government actually gave in the next week. So there's enough power if we only just take our courage in our hands. And you only need courage when you're threatened. You need some courage now.
What are people supposed to do? Let's say that they do usher in the new digital currency, and I'm sure it won't appear to be the mark of the beast, but maybe it becomes more obvious, as time goes on with people holding out. I think about this all the time. I have kids, they're small, I have a wife, I have people that depend on me. What are we supposed to do if we can't eat, take care of ourselves, provide for our families? What are we supposed to do?
But the fathers of the church say that you're not going to be able to get that chip without some type of renunciation of Christ. There's going to have to be some religious thing you're going to have to accept that is contrary to the will of God and contrary to Christ. And so the moral of the story is that you have to be willing to sacrifice the lesser good in order to achieve the greater good. You have to be willing to, I have to follow Christ regardless of the personal cost. Now, God will also very often provide for people. If it's his holy will that people survive that time frame, he'll make it possible for them to do it. The other thing is I've learned, which in the military, you've probably seen this too, the tighter you put your grip on a group of people, the more stuff slips through your fingers. And so I think that type of thing, there will be ways in which people will be able to survive. But I think they also have to be smart about it and actually learn just basic survival skills, learn how to fend for themselves just based on nature and things of that sort.
And get away from the myth of inevitability.
That's right.
This is something this is an ideological tool that is used to basically make people passive and convince people that they are, in fact, not free and we have no control over our fate or our destiny. And this is the idea that technology moves automatically. This is coming. There's nothing you can do to stop it.
Yeah.
And so you might as well just be passive and supine and roll over and take it. That is an excellent way to control people and to create a passive population.
Yeah.
Human beings, our ideas, our decisions do shape the direction of history, right? Of course, we believe that as Christians, that we can cooperate in God's providence by our own free decisions, and we can bring good into the world, or we can bring evil into the world based on our own choices. We need to maintain the conviction that we are free at an individual level, and those individual decisions collectively do have social consequences.
If you look at how the financial system is being sort of organized and fused, we have all these different pieces. And if you talk to most people, they find each piece convenient. The problem is when you get to 100% digital money and you kill cash and you kill any analog system like checks, what happens is the system fuses, bang, and you get, next slide, the digital concentration camp. So the example I used earlier this afternoon is, imagine getting a call in 2028 and someone says, a representative from the government, either you transgender your children or we're going to turn off your money. Unless you take this pharmaceutical or you give it to your children, we're going to turn off your money. We have another pandemic. They say, you're locked down, your money won't work if you leave your home. We've decided you shouldn't buy real meat, you shouldn't eat real meat, we're going to have you buy lab-grown meat. Your money will only work to buy lab-grown meat. So we're talking about a world that if you've grown up with the blessings of liberty that we've all enjoyed, you can't imagine. You can't imagine that anyone would do this. However, as a Christian, you can imagine who might do this.
Well, and that's what I love about your perspective. You understand that there's an enemy, there's a spiritual war that's going on, that's being waged, that wants to control human beings.
This is not, there is no financial problem. We have a governance problem. We have a secret governance system, and at the root of that secret governance system, it is a spiritual war. And so we are up against Satan.
So talk about faith communities and the role of leaders in this room who lead faith communities locally in cities all over America and some around the world. What are the ways we can resist this type of control?
So the first thing we can do, I used to have a pastor would say, if we can face it, God can fix it. And that's why it's so important to bring transparency. What I will tell you is one of the most effective tools, and a tool activists use all day long, dealing with this kind of control grid is prayer. So prayer has a very important role, but there are many practical things we can do. One is to use cash and use checks and keep analog systems alive. This can only happen if we go to 100% digital systems and we allow our money and our finances to be centralized. And so there's a great amount of things we can do to decentralize. It involves food and health as well, because in fact, if you look at controlling the money, you can't control the money unless you also control the food. So anything we can do, from gardening to supporting our local farmers, buying at our local farmers markets, anything we can do to build the kind of world we want with excellent local food systems and excellent health, it adds much more friction to the system. So use cash and walk back the digital systems. You can fly. I mean, I fly all the time, but I use a passport to go back in and get the real ID off your driver's license, and build the kind of fresh food and successful health systems that are designed to keep you healthy and not let you be controlled. So one of the things I love to do is work with young people who see the opportunity to help build more profitable local business on Main Street. And so, and it's these ideas working together. It's one of the reasons I really encourage everybody to team up with the local farmers, because the farmers work on low margins, and anything we can do to help them become more profitable is excellent, and using cash helps.
I think people like Catherine are gifted at seeing a little bit further forward because they've had such experience in our history to understand how economies work, the way the world works, the way currencies work. And I think for the Christian community, it's going to be imperative that we lead conversations. If people don't understand that there's a parallel structure being created, a way to operate that is more of a kingdom system that's operating against what the beast system that's going to be created, people won't ever opt out of the other system. And so we have to create those kind of countercultures together where we have trusted relationships. And just your final thoughts, but trusted relationships is the thing I know want people to understand is the thing they can be building now for that future.
The most wonderful analog thing we can do is get together and build shared intelligence about this. So I really commend you for doing this, Gabe, because it's a wonderful group.
Well, I want to also encourage people to follow you. She has a website called Solari.com, SOLARI.com, that is a further deeper dive into education around all of these topics where you can explore the areas that you are interested in. And let's all together thank Catherine Austin Fitts for being with us today.
Thank you, Gabe. Thank you.